Hello everyone and welcome back to this round of the FIDE World Cup out there in Baku, Azerbaijan. It's the quarterfinals day in the open section, and for the women it's the semi-finals. We've seen some action so far. The games are now all in the middle game phase, all very, very tense, and we can see a lot of nerves out there in the playing hall. Stakes are incredibly high. And there we see Magnus getting up from the board where he faces Gukesh. And before we jump into the action, of course, it's been a dramatic tournament so far. It's been a dramatic couple of weeks. And here we see some of the players who are left in the tournament, but also some of the players who have been knocked out. Some huge names, Peter. Some very high seeds here have already been eliminated.
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, you have been there. So, for example, the moment when Abdusatılov was knocked out, I think he was the first top seed. Someone, I believe many people had Abdusatılov as a hidden favorite, yeah, that we know that he's incredibly strong, very energetic, fantastic young player. What was the atmosphere there in Baku when people got to know that he exited the tournament?
Yeah, I can tell you there's something in the air in Baku. I think everyone was a bit afraid in the early stages. We saw as soon as the top seeds entered in the second round, there was already plenty of playoffs. Hikaru got dragged into a playoff where it went down to the wire, where he was a bit in trouble. And we saw Mamedyarov eliminated early, one of the home favorites. Yeah, it was definitely kind of, there were mutterings, there were murmurings, and there was a lot of fear. So it was no surprise eventually that the likes of Magnus and Fabiano got through to the quarterfinals. But of course, it was sad to say goodbye to some big names, and that's just how things work in the World Cup. That's why it's so entertaining. And we are left with 8 players. Of course, 4 Indian players. We should maybe mention that. Half of the field in the open section from India. Impressive stuff there. The youngsters definitely having their day. And in the women's section, of course, 4 brave fighters left in that one as well. What was the biggest name for you that was the kind of shock of the tournament, seeing eliminated so far, Peter?
Well, I think that you very nicely highlighted, yeah, that usually top seeds does not like when their colleague starts to get eliminated, because you somehow feel that the so-called underdogs get the confidence. All right, if that guy managed to do that, look at this. Yeah, he's of course a brilliant player, but he shows some weakness, he's nervous, he feels the pressure, whatever. I mean, those are the signs the so-called lower-rated players are waiting for and are trying to jump on the occasion. And right from the start, yeah, when Shakhriyar Mamedyarov was eliminated by the young Singaporean Grandmaster, that was also a big shock of the tournament. Finally, of course, Hikaru's exit. One cannot say that it's a shock because he was knocked out by the incredibly strong Praggnanandhaa, but still, I mean, Hikaru, of course, also one of the absolute favorites to win the event, had been knocked out there. Nobody is safe. Magnus Carlsen was on the verge of elimination against Vincent Keymer. It was basically about one single move. If Vincent finds that knight takes e4 move, and by the way, the same knight takes e4 move is on the board which Magnus has just played.
Oh, perfect timing, Peter. Almost scripted there. Knight takes e4. Huge miss there from Vincent. I must admit, like, I was so shocked. I thought he was going to find it, Vincent, and I was shocked that Magnus even allowed that, I've got to say, back in their match a few days back. But meanwhile, this knight takes e4 has been played. And to me, at least, it looks very healthy for black now, suddenly. That position we were discussing earlier, dynamically balanced, we called it, white having the bishop pair. But look how active black's pieces are. And, okay, Gukesh decided to trade on e4 because of this move, bishop f3. Is his plan to somehow liquidate everything here? Black can keep the tension, though. There's no threat here. White just wants to get the knight out to e2. Finally, get some breathing space for that piece. But yeah, I just like the way this is turning for Magnus, just visually. Just can that turn into anything tangible? Knight takes g3
yeah, that's
is a
the big
question.
Well. Yes, I mean, knight takes g3, probably bishop takes b7. Is that the first line? But we have to address it. Yeah, knight takes g3. Okay, a g3 or bishop takes b7. Okay, let's first analyze the capture. Then black has a choice, but probably going after the bishop is more natural. Rook a7, ace takes g3, rook takes b7, and then white has a choice. Probably he should eliminate the h7 pawn in order to get access to some activity, because if black is attacking somehow with knight f6 or rook g7, then these pawns will be super vulnerable in the long run. I'm expecting rook takes h7, and after rook takes g3, black is tiny bit better. I mean, in the mid-90s, we would say, like, we don't want to be white against Karpov or Mickey Adams in this type of positions. Now it's clear that we don't want to be black against Magnus Carlsen.
Yeah, he definitely don't want to be suffering in this endgame. And the reason black is better here is simple. I mean, it's just this g2 pawn. And it's easy to imagine those black pawns rolling down the board, the f and e pawns. Black has a beautiful square on e7, as you're highlighting. White's knight is going to take an age to get anywhere good. You're going to have to tie down your rooks defending g2. And maybe with an idea like this in mind, he has indeed taken on g3. I was reluctant initially. I just thought, okay, it's going to fizzle out if pieces come off the board. But I think Magnus has seen this line and seen deeper. Of course, there's h takes g3 here as well, but it won't change too much necessarily. Maybe h takes g3 is a slightly better version, though, for white.
I mean, all eyes on Gukesh, yeah, because he plays with the white pieces. It's so easy to get nervous, yeah, because one thing you don't want to be against Magnus is a position where you have zero chances for counterplay. And this is certainly one of those positions, which means that Magnus has the chance of grinding this position simply systematically without taking any risk. And we know exactly that he has the feeling of perfect harmony. Every single move will slowly improve his position. And the question is, will you be able to hold on to that pressure in a long term? Of course, in a short term, there is no big pressure on white, but I already feel like there's going to be some kind of a very long grind from Magnus.
Yeah, and somehow, I mean, Gukesh has been on fire. He's been in the form of his life and probably the best player out there this late year. But yeah, somehow it feels like these last few moves have been slightly negative. It's as if he's trying to force the issue. I'm not sure it's kind of helped him too much. Like you say, 2-result game now with Magnus grinding. And even though Magnus let some chances slip, for example, against Vincent in their playoffs, it does feel like his cup of tea. And yeah, you can see how focused Magnus is on the camera. It's Gukesh's move, but Magnus is feeling optimistic. Great body language there. And okay, what to do? If we take on g3, bishop takes f3. Maybe this isn't a better version. Can black be greedy if knight takes f3 and just grab all the pawns?
Rook takes g3, rook takes g7.
Rook takes g2. Am I blundering something here? It was a bit shaky.
Well, I have some knight e5 move, yes. Yeah. I think I have some knight e5 trick.
This is nice. Otherwise, yeah, otherwise black would just be a pawn up. Knight takes e5, rook h8, check. It's a nasty skewer. And the idea is that black's knight can no longer block on f8. Okay, so maybe this is one trick that Gukesh has up his sleeve. How about
yes, one question.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, also that instead of rook takes g3, what happens if black, for example, just protects with knight f6? Yeah, is there an argument to be made for that move and just make sure that these pawns are stuck there?
Definitely. I want to route knight e5 again, though, just to try and go active. I don't want to passively defend my pawns, otherwise long term I'll just be stuck.
But here maybe can I touch you with rook g5? I would like to force that rook away from h1 so that the pawn on h7 will not be vulnerable. Then go some rook c8, king e7, and just coordinate forces.
Yeah, you were praising me, Peter, for strategic stuff earlier, but I've got to praise your play here. Just everything looks so harmonious.
The point is that this transformed into e4 structures. Yeah, so I feel like e4 structures, all these nuances, these are very much in my blood, but all these symmetrical d4 structures with the bishop on g2 that, you know, if you ask me whom to ask as a tag team partner, if in chess we would have a tag team partner, I would pick you any day.
Oh, Peter, we need to get that going, some commentary pairs chess.
Would be great. Would be awesome. That's for sure.
Yeah, yes, I mean, like you said, the pawn structure, it resembles a Sicilian now, or a French Caro-Kann sometimes with this structure. And definitely suits Magnus here. Oof, tough decision. I don't envy Gukesh at all. Looks like he'll be saddled with some weak pawns and a sad defense. He just needs to get out of this game with a draw, I think. Just somehow needs to knuckle down now.
Exactly, that's his main task. Also, we have to highlight, because you mentioned that, yeah, this can happen from Sicilian, it can happen from French, can happen from Caro-Kann. The main point being that actually this 3 versus 2 on the queen side is not going anywhere from the white side. And this center pawn, this f7 e6 plus the dynamic on the king side guarantees black that despite seemingly there is very little material left on the board, there is so much tension. And this is what we have witnessed in the game between Nils Grandelius and Arjun Erikaishi when Arjun went on to win that very important game in the previous round against Nils. Seemingly nothing is happening, but it was unpleasant. And then with incredible technique, Arjun also went on to win that game. All eyes on Gukesh. He needs to survive this.
Yeah, and that goes to show, I mean, classical chess wisdom as well. Sometimes they say, oh, the outside pawn majority, the queenside majority, but here it's just about the fact that white's kingside pawns will be weak. He takes on g3 rather than b7. We looked at both variations, and that latter line that we looked at looks like it might come into play. Magnus will now trade bishops. I wonder if g takes f3 is anything to... well, is it that an improvement for white? It's sad for the white knight, but at least white's pawns will be healthier if you keep more pawns on the board.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's a very set choice. Let's just show that bishop takes f3. Of course, we wanted first intuitively to capture with the knight to go for some dynamic. However, if there won't be any dynamic, then of course knight takes f3 is less appealing than g takes f3. And now a very big question, because g takes f3 is kind of a defensive move. And what?
Knight takes immediately.
Knight takes, of course. Yeah, this is the human way that you want to get counterplay. But if the counterplay backfires, if there won't be any counterplay, then of course black's pawns will be really vulnerable. Now, big question, how much time will Magnus spend in this position? Because he's spoiled with the choice. Rook takes g3 is an option, knight f6 is an option, just protecting that pawn with rook g7. But I still feel like knight f6, rook takes g3 are the most natural ones.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a straight choice between those two moves. And yeah, I'm not sure which one Magnus will go for. The more I look at it, maybe rook takes g3. These days, Magnus is a bit more direct than he used to be, where he was maybe a bit more of a grinder and very patient. Now maybe just king e7, unless I'm blundering something. Because again, g2 is extremely weak, and suddenly I'm coordinated, ready to bring the knight round to f6.
Yeah, now the big question, is there some tactic? Like, can I play knight d4?
Threatening knight c6 check. And if I play rook c8, you want to play rook e1.
Yes, exactly. I would like to target this king on e7.
Yeah, this is where I know what I want strategically, but making it happen is hard, because these younger players, they'll find all the tricks, they'll find the energy to disturb black's coordination. Two big threats. Yeah, suddenly... Yeah, I'm turned off by this variation. I want to play your knight f6 now in the initial, in the position we have on the board. I think Magnus will be inclined, actually, if he can't make the other line work, to play something more stable.
Yeah, I would like to highlight, because I see with computer that actually the idea behind rook takes g3, rook takes h7 according to a computer is this retreating move knight d7 to f8, which probably gives perfect harmony for black. But the knight on d7 from human perspective looks so nice. We don't want to move that knight. So unless Magnus really goes very deep into this position and realizes that, okay, hang on, I have this knight f8, it's a fantastic move. I hit that rook away, now the pawn on g2 is hanging, and if white has to fall back and be passive, then you might be tempted to go for knight f8, but it's such a hidden move. It's not the main move that a human brain comes up with.
Yeah, not obvious at all. I guess the knight might eventually land on g6, just cuts out any rook h8s, and then it might jump to f4 a bit later, cuts out knight e5. Again, it's one of those things, it's like once the computer says it, it's like, obviously, of course, but to spot that from afar when you have other tempting options is not necessarily going to happen.
Exactly.
Even if you're Magnus Carlsen.
Yeah. Because intuitively, yeah, that we mentioned this, that usually when you get a position like this and you feel like you can have a long grind, you don't want to go for forced lines unless you know exactly that they work in your favor. Yeah, and this rook takes g3, rook takes h7 position is slightly mysterious. There is a dynamic, and also Magnus might feel like, Gukesh is such a sharp player. If he gets a chance, he will use it. So I better keep everything under control and not let him get any activity.
Yeah, and we see Magnus head in hands, thinking for around 3.5 minutes so far. And I think, yeah, again, his sense of kind of the critical moment might be spot on here. If he does end up playing rook takes g3 and knight f8, then hats off to him, and he'll deserve the pressure that he'll be able to exert on Gukesh, but not obvious, and I'm not sure whether to expect that. So either way, Magnus in the driver's seat. It's just about how much pressure he can exert from this position.
Yeah, and I would like to highlight, if you already have access to the computer, then okay, let's use it to our advantage, yeah, because of course the players are so much more deeply involved with the position than we can be. The move knight f6, which comes so natural, at least it came to me very naturally. If we get time to go king e7, rook c8, we basically win the game. However, there is a certain line to be calculated. Rook h6, hitting that knight immediately on f6, and apparently king e7 is already not working, because then white jumps with knight to e5, threats knight c6 check, and also rook f1, and suddenly black's pieces are vulnerable. This means computer says after rook h6 you have to play rook g6, kind of. If you follow it up in the principal way, then white trades, and anyway jumps with the knight to e5, and suddenly we see a transformation of structure. There is some dynamic option for white. White can also advance his queenside pawn, so maybe this is a reason why Magnus is also not that sure about knight f6 or rook take g3, and he needs to spend all his time at the moment.
Yeah, again, once you see it kind of by process of elimination, this is one you want to rule out. Suddenly black's best piece, the rook on g8, has been traded off. You've kind of improved your pawn structure as black, but you're just one move too slow. Again, if black could get king e7 and rook c8 here in one go, then you're loving life. But yeah, here... Yeah, so wise the engines these days, Peter. I remember the days when the engines would struggle even in positions like this. But now they reveal all, and rook takes g3 could, I guess, I mean, I don't see the computer, but it could be significantly stronger than knight f6 here.
Yeah, according to computer, yes. I mean, okay, rook take g3 is like 0-20, and everything is like 0-0. Yeah, so okay. It really, yes, shows that computer believes, and this is probably also the reason why Gukesh opted for knight takes f3. And we have to mention that these top guys, these super guys, they are basically able to calculate lines like a computer. Yeah, they sense the direction, and they are capable of. For us commentators, of course, we are covering so many, we are also trying to explain everything in general terms. So easy to miss things which the players would never miss. And I'm very interested to see how Magnus will react and deal with this position.
Yeah. I mean, Magnus, his clock handling, we talked about my time struggles, my time management, but his is just perfect in positions like this. And the fact that he's gone into the think, and he's probably just comparing and contrasting these two moves. The more I look, the more I think. I'm kind of concluding that he might come to the right decision. Rook takes g3, and 0.2 might not sound like much. And normally it isn't much in most types of positions, but here it's significant. It could be the difference between putting long-term pressure on, maybe it'll be a draw anyway, or just kind of fizzling out immediately to a level position. So, important moment. Let's give Magnus some time to think. And
also to admire our camera, yeah, because it's so nice that we have access to the camera. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to sense the importance of this moment. Look at this. It's a queenless endgame, seemingly more or less balanced according to the engine, but the players feel that there is so much more to this position. I'm just loving the fact that we have access to this info.
Yeah, it might be 0.2 difference on the line here, but it's going to feel like life and death for these two players. And that's the big difference. That's what sets them apart in tiny, tiny margins at this top level. So yeah, let's let Magnus pause there and think. Should we check in on maybe one of the other games?
Where you want to go?
Oof. All of them look exciting to me. I mean, maybe just briefly check in on Dominguez against Caruana, because Caruana did take a big decision. And strategically, again, it's super complex. But he did put his pawn on d5. And now, a bit of a threat from Dominguez potentially is the black e5 pawn hanging. And how does Fabi deal with this? So complex, so tough to decide.
It's the eternal question in these structures. Let's just very quickly go back. So it was rook c1, the move. Not much has happened. However, very important decision was taken by Fabiano, going d5, rook a2 to c2. Black has sidestepped with the king to h7. Very important to highlight that the tactic rook takes c6, rook takes c6, knight takes c5 fork does not work because rook takes c1 comes with a check. That's the reason why it's not working yet. White goes bishop c3, putting pressure on the e5 pawn. Black protects with bishop d6, and white goes queen b2, basically saying like, please show me how you're going to defend that pawn on e5. Are you ready and willing to push d5, d4, which takes away certain tension on the e4 square? I believe that if black plays the move d4, it should be connected probably with the knight g8, knight g7 kind of regrouping, also opening up a way of eventual exchange sacrifice on f3. And we also see why that little prophylactic move king h7 comes so handy for black.
Oh, that's so instructive, Peter. Rerouting a knight which looks nice and healthy on f6, but it's got no purpose. Yeah, to support the other knight on c6, to cover some squares, open up rooks. Yeah, I mean, these again, these details from top players, they look so harmonious once you spot them, but just seeing them from afar, planning them, enacting these ideas. Yeah, maybe we put it on the board. Knight g8, really, really nice. Because if you're stuck, if you can't do anything, then black's just riddled with a bad structure, and suddenly everything holds, and you've got control of some key squares. I love it. I like this knight g8 move. I was reluctant to push d4, but as long as, like you say, it's connected with this regrouping, looks healthy.
And I also like the fact that eventually, of course, white will move the knight from f3 probably to h2 and eventually land on g4, putting pressure on the e5 pawn anyway, that we have knight e7, knight g6, and that knight on the g6 will do a wonderful job protecting the pawn on e5. It also eyes the f4 square, and eventually we will be able to move that knight from c6 somewhere and start trading the rooks on the c file. And I believe if we can get all the rooks off the board, then black's pressure against the b4 pawn will compensate for the weakness on e5. I do believe that this is some kind of a dynamic equality.
Yeah, but it's certainly the type of equality that, I mean, if all of those things happen that you mentioned, black could start getting ambitious. After all, you have more space. You can play on both flanks. Suddenly, I'm not sure what the white rooks are doing. The white bishop's a bit stuck. White has less space to maneuver. So yeah, I think d4 here will eventually happen. Fabiano has a big time advantage, 25 minutes extra on the clock. I was wondering if there are any alternatives, because I don't see anything, unless white's not threatening to take on e5. For example, if I play a move like rook d8, rook f d8, or rook f e8, is white threatening?
Well, let's take a look. I mean, why not?
Yeah, why not?
I was wondering if there are any. You take with the knight.
Yep.
I take with the bishop. You take on c2. Yeah, I guess that's what you were hoping for. I take. And finally, somewhere, some queen d1 check. Yeah, that would be the...
I was hoping when the smoke cleared that I could get that, but I didn't find the right order to open the d file.
Yes, if it happens like this, then clearly white has rook c7 probably winning, but even knight takes e4, just to highlight that we are not blundering this queen d1 idea. If you start with d takes e4, then also white has so many tempting options. I mean, this doesn't look appealing for black at all.
No. I mean, the main reason, I mean, I'm not attracted to this at all for black. The main reason I'm wondering is because Fabiano has been thinking for almost 5 minutes, and d4 looks pretty much forced, or at least quite desirable from what we've been seeing. So slightly odd, but maybe it's just this knight g8 type of maneuver that he's thinking next. It's not just this one move.
Yes, yeah. I think that he's thinking long terms. Yeah, it's obvious that, and he also has the time advantage. He knows that Len is a super deep player, so before making a committal decision like d5, d4, he really wants to get into the essence of the position, not just make a move that, okay, I have to push it, but I don't know what to do next. Yeah, because if you push and then you start thinking, your opponent gets a lot of confidence. If finally you push and then you follow it up in 1-2 minutes with a very nice kind of plan, that also puts a big pressure on your opponent that, wow, okay, so he's ready to transform the structure, and he has this great maneuver. For example, you can easily be impressed over the board.
Yep. Completely agree. So while these games tick along, I noticed there have been a lot of moves in the women's section. So maybe we can see the bird's eye view for a moment and decide where to go next, Peter.
Great idea.
looks like a lot of action. We've mentioned, we've gone through a lot of the open games. Not too much has changed in the clash between Vidit and Abasov. Looks like great preparation and a level position still there, level endgame. Pragg did play that queen d2 move against Erigaisi, and Erigaisi found a reaction, so still looking pretty balanced, symmetrical over there. But the women's games look anything but balanced right now. Looks quite dramatic, both on the Muzychuk Salimova board and Tan Zhongyi against Goryachkina. Any favorites? Where to go, Peter?
Yeah, I think that first let's go to the Anna's game, because we have been discussing some force lines, some interesting lines. We were more into that position, and the game took a completely different turn. So the moment when we left, it was bishop g5, and we were kind of discussing that bishop f6 is maybe the most natural move. On the other hand, we have also seen some forced direct lines, which were so hard to evaluate after white was grabbing the pawns. Finally, Salimova decided that she wants something different and played the move bishop takes c, which was computed as top engine line. The reason why I did not want to mention it before, because I thought like, okay, if it happens, we will talk about it. If not, then this is now not the most important thing to highlight, because we can talk half an hour again after bishop takes c3 about this transformation of structure. First of all, the tactical justification, I think it's very important to highlight that bishop takes e7 runs into queen a5, which just goes on to show that Salimova is an incredible tactician. She has tons of confidence that she was out of book, but was able to calculate and navigate herself in these complications.
Impressive geometry there. She's really in top form, you can tell.
Yes, let's just highlight this queen a5 move, because I was thinking when computer was showing bishop takes c3 that what happens after bishop takes e7, and here is the answer. It is queen a5. If the queen takes on d7, then black just takes the rook on e1, and black ends up being a piece up. So yes, b takes c3 happened. There is still the pressure on e7. Black has to follow it up with this ugly move f6. f7, f6. Now the pawn on d7 will really be a backward pawn. It's somehow dangerous. Bishop f4 played, making sure that the e5 square is covered, that black is not able to jump out with knight e5. Rook f7, rook a d1. And the fact that now she gave up the pawn on b7, I felt like if black goes for this position, it means that black wants to set up a blockade. So a move like b7, b6 was very tempting. And I don't know why she didn't do that. She opted for rook c8. But okay, we're going to go for the current position, yeah?
Yeah, it looks very natural, b6 just giving a square to the black knight as well. But yeah, let's catch up with the game. It looks like she's gone for something even more ambitious. Salimova here, who we see on the camera. And now she's trying to trap this bishop.
Yeah, counterplay. She goes for direct counterplay. She doesn't want a positional battle there after f6, which might have given Anna the chance to stabilize her structure on the king side. Wow. Do you understand what's going on? Because I'm struggling to navigate.
Me too, Peter. And I mean, first, I'm thinking, okay, two things. Firstly, is d6 helpful for white? I don't think so, because black will shut down with e5, and it looks like this structure that Capablanca made famous with this white bishop entombed on g3. And secondly, how to save our bishop if d6 isn't productive. h3 or h4 tends to be the eternal dilemma in these types of situations. h4 feels like it could open up lines on the king side. Is that good for black? Is that good for white? It's really hard to tell. h3 would be the safe move, but then I guess black will take on c3 and the game will go on. Big decision for Anna Muzychuk right now.
Yes, and I think now we understand and appreciate why Salimova opted for this line, that certainly there is some kind of a question, some kind of a pressure on white. The move h4 is so scary. I mean, some g takes h4, and eventually that knight starts jumping towards the king side with knight e5. The rook can join the party with rook g7 somewhere, maybe some move like rook c4 on the fourth rank, posing some problems. Somehow the move h3 is maybe not that ambitious, but it certainly feels so much more safer.
Yeah, I would be choosing the cowardly h3. h4, it's either very good or it's very, very bad. So, yeah, I think Anna will probably pause a bit and then play h3. And yeah, how would you evaluate that? Okay, she doesn't even pause. H3 on the board. She comes to the same conclusion as you, Peter.
Yes, it's nice to see Anna also being human. That's how we like to play chess. The computer choice was H4, but I don't think that anyone would be really interested to go along all those adventures, because White's king would be just way too vulnerable. H3, nice little move. Now the big question, does Black include the move H4, Bishop H2, and then captures the pawn on C3? Or does she take immediately? Probably does not really matter. It's probably just a matter of move order here.
Yeah. It feels like you'll play H4 anyway at some point, so you might as well play it now. But then again, it's not going away in the next few moves. So yeah, Salamova has some targets on the third rank. This is why she included these pawn pushes. Now F3 is hit, and then potentially H3 afterwards. Really interesting decision. Yeah, I mean, I find this so tough to evaluate. I somehow quite like Black's chances, but visually, White should be doing quite well.
Yes, I also feel like as long as the bishop is on the diagonal and Black is not able to jump with knight e5, White has nothing to worry about. I feel like all this activity, the rook on e1, rook on d1, queen b7, combined with this bishop on h2, guarantees me that my king is kind of safe. Yeah. Yes, the pawn on f3 is vulnerable, but the rook on f7 is not really participating in the game. It's more like a defensive piece. That's why it was also so important humanly not to open up a new front on the king side. Just want to make sure that that rook on f7 rests as long as possible.
Would you now play a stabilizing move like king g2, or would you be more inclined to just grab on a7, give White that trump card of the a pawn running? And
well, I think you know me. I think you know me, David, that I'm going to go king g2 for sure. Yeah,
me too, Peter.
Yes, however, I'm not sure, because exactly the reason why many of my games ended in a draw, I mean, not because I was playing dry. No, I like to go for complications, everything, but my nature was always like, first I stabilize and then I look for action. And we know exactly that if you play against the best players in the world, many times this fraction of a second of stabilizing one more time disables you to get the momentum and miss the moment, and after you don't get a second chance. And with moves like king g2, I have spoiled some advantages where I should have been more energetic, but exactly in this position, it's so difficult to judge what is the right approach.
Yeah, I guess the alternative would be a line such as queen takes a7, rook takes f3, and maybe there rook e3, for example. And White has the passed a pawn at least up her sleeve. But yeah, very hard to evaluate this type of position.
Yeah, my intuition says that I would prefer to be White for the fact that, yes, h4, bishop h2 had been included. I feel like White can shut down the game any moment. Yeah, it's White is not risking anything. White is just way too active. And Black still has these awkward little questions that, what do you do with this structure? Yeah, and also the queen on d8 is not yet developed. Well, there is one tactical idea that I want to highlight. Of course, White will never fall for it, that if eventually at some point, okay, we can also take on c3, queen takes a7, if ever that knight moves away from d7, then one has to watch out for some e7, e5, hitting the queen, transforming the pawn structure, but even this does not work because of d takes e6, using another tactical motive on Black's queen. I just find it that we have to highlight this because it's a strategical position, but still so many tactical aspects here.
Yeah, definitely tactics all over the place. And Salamova is debating whether to capture on c3. Should we check out the other semi-final in the Women's World Cup? It looks like this one still similar pawn structure, but as far as my understanding goes, it looks like Black's achieved everything she could hope for. She's stabilized. White's never really going to safely push forward in the center now. White's knight on a4 doesn't make a great impression. And Black's potentially going to play for c5 long term. e3 looks extremely weak right now.
Yes, I mean, basically when I looked at this position, I was shocked. Yeah, how did this happen? It strategically almost feels like a winning position for Black, and I'm really not exaggerating. I mean, that pawn on e3 is vulnerable. If White's pawn would be on f2, everything would be normal. Everything would be fine. And one could even make a case that the pawn on c6 is the weakness. But with this weak pawn plus all the dark squares, I mean, I see the big long-term potential of the bishop on f6. Oh my god, and I also see some knight g7, knight f5 regroupings. White is in a serious trouble.
Oh, that's a classy one, knight g7, knight f5. Yeah, it feels like she's mixed plans somehow. She went for this kind of f3 approach, committed her rook to e1, but then couldn't pull the trigger and go for e4, deciding eventually to go for something more strategic, like trading a set of minor pieces and putting the rook back on d1. But yeah, unfortunately at the top level chess, it's mixing plans can backfire. And yeah, let's see how we got there.
Okay. Yes, and wow. Yes, I mean, first of all, I'm already surprised that there was a wasted move on h3. Yeah, that's the first wasted move. Then this rook a1, we talked about that maybe rook a d1 would have been more natural. And then this knight g3, I don't exactly know where this knight is heading. Now, black immediately uses the moment with knight e6 because we talked about that eventually the pawn on h7 might be hanging, but not in this circumstance. After bishop f6, white was happily sacrificing that pawn because of what exactly? Let's just quickly get a chance on updating this, probably some tactics.
Bishop h4 is a big threat in some positions, I guess.
Yes, exactly. What a nasty pin.
You want that pawn back on h2 now. That h3 move has definitely come back to haunt white.
Yes, so that's why she took bishop a6, and now we already kind of understand why things have deteriorated. Rook takes a6. Black has a perfect structure. Everything is fine. Got the dark squared bishop. And white is never able to push e4 in this construction. Knight f5, h5, rook c1, g6. Everything is pushed back with very natural moves. Knight g3, queen b8. Wow, that's also a very nice touch, hitting the knight and also setting up the queen to this perfect square on b5. Knight e2, queen b5, rook cd1. White doesn't know what to do. Obviously, rook a8 and b3. Finally, that's the current position.
Yeah, and Peter, ever since you said it, I'm so attracted to this idea of knight g7. It looks like Goryachkina just played rook c8, also very tempting, maybe setting up for c5. But yeah, that knight g7 idea you mentioned looked like it was going to push white over the edge, potentially.
Yeah, well, rook a8, of course, very natural. Black is planning to go c5, and it's a very nice position. However, maybe this move knight g7 was extremely strong. The point being that, of course, after knight g7, white will push the pawn to e4. However, then black nevertheless has this stunning idea, I believe, to go knight f5. That was the whole point, going for this knight e3 fork. And after e takes f5, rook takes e2, black is kind of invading into white's position. Okay, one could give an argument that, okay, who knows, queen c1, and eventually white king going to h6 could create some counterplay, but just g5. We shut everything down, rook a8 is coming, perfect control.
Yeah, it's easy to see why kind of Goryachkina didn't want to invite any complications or kind of make too much of a mess. But yeah, this one looks like she stabilizes, and weak pawns on d4, a2, f5, rook on the second rank. Oof, this would have been tough, but okay, she didn't go for this, and Tang Zhongyi maybe breathing a sigh of relief, at least for now. c5 does liquidate some stuff, does trade stuff off, but I'm not sure it necessarily helps black increase the advantage. So how would we try and minimize the damage here for white?
Yeah, queen d3. Queen d3, I would really like to play the move queen d3.
Yeah, same.
The problem is, however, that we might not be starting to take on b5 because of c takes b5, and then our knight will be vulnerable. That's a problem. But still, I feel like setting up that status quo with the queens is the best, and then black will not be able to play c5 so easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like that's kind of damage limitation here. It's my first instinct too. Is it just feels like white is too loose, too many weak pawns, too many weak squares. So getting the queens off will lessen that effect. Yeah, still a lot to play for, unless black has a knockout blow, which I don't see after queen d3. Feels like Tang Zhongyi's back in it.
Yeah, it's not obvious that how big is black's advantage. I mean, it's clear that black is perfectly comfortable. Black is the one pushing, which is very good news for black. Of course, it's a dream scenario, but if white is now clearly only aiming to hold the position, and I think it's very important to understand with the white pieces as quickly as you are under pressure that just let's forget that I had the white pieces because it doesn't mean anything. I have to get the most out of the position that I have on the board, and white has to try to fight for survival.
Yeah, so let's give Tan Zhongyi some time to come to that decision. Queen d3, trying to trade queens. Looks like it will be at least relatively safe for white. Maybe we can head back to the bird's eye view and decide where to go next before we head on our next break. It looks like Magnus did go for that rook takes g3 decision. Meanwhile, Vidit Abasov still very balanced. Dominguez Caruana following your predictions there. Yeah, a bit of a profit there, Peter. And yeah, Praggnanandhaa against Erigaisi still looking level. So what are your thoughts?
Wow, I think let's go to the Magnus's game quickly because there had been some developments. In fact, we see that line, the escalating line. Magnus opted for rook takes g3, so no surprise there. But after rook takes h7, yeah, clearly he played the most natural human move, king e7. Gukesh immediately jumped on the chance with knight d4, and Magnus played the best move in the position, knight e5, not falling for this rook c8, rook e1, Cipollito. And after knight e5, yeah, because I feel like it's a solid kind of position, yeah, so you don't feel like there could be anything important, but after rook c8, rook e1, suddenly things escalate. Yeah, that's why I consider it such an important moment, and I highlight it with a Cipollito kind of phrase. And knight e5, making sure that everything is covered. Nevertheless, Gukesh anyway goes rook e1, hits that knight. The knight can't move because of the fork with knight f5. Magnus will have to guard that knight. Do we go king d6 or king f6, or do we ignore and go rook? Yeah, what are we doing at all?
Yeah, I mean, the dilemma, first instinct, I wanted to say king d6, but then the dilemma is what to do after rook back to d1. We don't really want to repeat the position. Okay, Magnus answers for us. Maybe he thought any king moves here would be met by checks, and he plays rook g4 instead, trying to transform the position. Okay, to trade knights or not to trade knights, Peter? Big moment for Gukesh.
Yes, and the reason why Magnus did it with rook g4, because one could say that why did Magnus pick then this rook? Why not rook d8? Because rook d8 would run into knight f5 check, I'm guessing. Rook d8, yes, it's confirmed. Yeah, knight f5 check. And then black has to depart from this lovely e6 pawn. And it's clear that black still keeps some initiative, but white should be able to hold this position without much problems. Just way too little material. Magnus wants to keep the structure intact. He feels like finally if he's able to squeeze something out of this position is thanks to this e6 pawn.
Yeah. And for example, if he does take on e5 now, Gukesh, rook takes d4, maybe we put that position on the board. The troubles are far from over for white there. Just rook g8 is a huge threat. The g2 pawn really weak. Rook a to d8 might come. Yeah, I don't see any way for white's rooks to coordinate in time suddenly. Yeah, okay, maybe with best play, the computer will hold the draw here, but this is going to be a lot more suffering, at least a couple more hours of suffering for Gukesh just for the draw. Are there any alternatives?
Well, I don't know. Rook g4 feels like a very nice move. Yeah, it's kind of knight f5 check. I believe that we have to discuss knight f5 check, which kind of forces king f6. And then we activate that knight. We jump to d6 and hope for some tactical options with rook f1 check, some pressure on the f7 pawn.
King g6. Ooh. This is the type of position where in a blitz game, I would start to blunder as black because it's suddenly got a bit wild.
But it's a very interesting move. What do I do? I mean, intuitively, I wanted rook e-h1, but maybe it does absolutely nothing. I don't know. Let's check it out.
Things are hanging together. The white knight doesn't have too many squares either. Rook d8 I was hoping for.
Yes, and this knight on e5 is a monster knight protecting back on f7. You want to go rook d8, kicking that knight away. I mean,
unless you have some perpetual check.
Well, I have a couple of checks, but I'm not really understanding where it leads to, and I'm not that happy because, okay, hang on, rook a1,
you can take my knight on e5.
King g5, rook h5, but finally you anyway take the knight on d6. And it's not a good trade for me. Again, we are back to this very unpleasant rook endgame.
I'll pretend that was part of the plan, but yeah, it feels like it works out for black, just about.
Yeah, and one computer line, actually here after king g6, Computer was saying that, okay, white should probably just fall back with the rook, and there is a case to be made for f7, f6, just suddenly reinforcing that knight on e5, not allowing some stunning ideas like rook d8. He is met by knight takes f7 according to Computer. That's how Computer wants to save the position. Knight takes f7, rook takes e6 check, and we sacrifice the piece, but we get access to the b6 pawn, and then we're going to go bc, king b2, rook c3, cement, and we are holding.
Cemento, Peter. Yeah.
Yes.
Looks like a draw in this case. That would be easy to blunder into. That would be easy to miss for Magnus. But at the same time, Gukesh, I mean, he's relying on these types of tactics to work to avoid a load of suffering in the near future, which is not an easy spot to be in. And I think he might just take this knight on e5. It feels like that might be the path of least resistance, but at least it's the path that you know that you can kind of guarantee a playable position. It's going to be unpleasant, but should still be tenable.
Yeah, I think that would be kind of the old school. Yeah, that, okay, I take on e5 and I know it's unpleasant, but okay, I have survived worse than this. I will somehow defend. But it will, I think if we ask Magnus at this moment, if we would have the chance to ask him, he would say, yeah, please take on e5. And maybe it's not so bad, but it's not equal. And thank you very much. That's all I need. The lines with knight f5 check put a little bit more pressure on black, and they are risky. Of course, they can backfire for white, but I do believe that these young, energetic players like Gukesh or Praggnanandhaa or all these youngsters have this inner feeling, also the confidence and the quality to navigate these complications much better than the old school guys who are a little bit lazy, and that's why we want to eliminate all the tactical options as quickly as possible.
Yeah, my friends do call me Lazy Dave for a reason, so we'll wait that decision from Gukesh here. Will he just trade off knights and go into a slightly worse endgame, or will he start playing for tricks to try and confuse Magnus Carlsen? Meanwhile, let's go to another short break. We'll be back very shortly as we start to approach the time control here at the FIDE World Cup in Baku, Azerbaijan. Join us again in a few minutes.